everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it with a long title. Those of you who have known people who genuinely believe that they were wolfkin or elves or had special powers, what happened when reality gripped them in the face? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. My best friend in high school and my first 2 years of college genuinely believed that she could not only speak to forestry, but that she was a wingless fairy. She would oftentimes, when we went walking her dogs, lean to trees and translate for me what the rustling of nature spoke of. She also would scribble in her books what she called new alchemy, violently scribbled circles and vague shapes she believed held magical and fey magic through her own powers. We had a falling out after a few years, after she moved to the other side of the country to be with her grandmother. We started talking about a few months ago, and I found out she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. She's currently on 2 types of medication, and she told me her walks are depressingly quiet now. Not exactly the same as other kin, but very much in the vein of the question in terms of total reality denial. I know someone who totally, wholeheartedly believes that they are a Jedi Master. Our families go way back, so I happen to know other kids were merciless to him all through childhood. He's always had problems, though. Kind of one of those people you can feel aren't quite right, but not exactly why. He decided he was a Jedi Master one day, just like out of the blue. Credit where credit is due, he went all the way with it. Became a minor nerd celebrity for a while. At first, when people challenged the Jedi thing, why don't you have powers then? He'd say, Jedi is a mindset, not a power. Or sometimes, you don't know the powers I may have, and try to play it off like a joke. But the dude was 100% serious. If you pushed, he would outright melt down with tears and screaming. Apparently, his parents financially supported him pretty much entirely until he, and this part confuses the crap out of me, got married and had a kid while still insisting on the Jedi thing. After that, the wife supported him. Eventually, he got tired of that and left his family to take off with a teenager he met at a convention. That's when we cut ties with him. You can be a Jedi all you want, but cutting and leaving your kid is some Sith Lord shit. My cousin, she 100% believed she was a werewolf. She was finally diagnosed with schizophrenia and bipolar years ago. She's doing a lot better now. Went to school with a girl who acted like a dog, barked, panted, pawed at people. In class, she would reply normally, but then bark at the end. This went on for 3 years. Decided to look her up on Facebook, and she has a good job and seems normal. Teenagers are effing weird. And the teachers were just okay with that? Things got strange. Unfortunately, yes. I met a girl at a very young age while going to church. Her family was deeply religious, but in a messed up way. So we dated off and on, and after high school hit it off pretty strong. She honestly believed she was a fairy. She would get faced with the reality of not being a fairy and completely shut down, sometimes even attempting suicide. Found out later she has really bad schizophrenia and had to get away from her after she discovered drugs, and I couldn't help her anymore. I met a guy who was supposedly pretty close to the level in Scientology when you're supposed to develop powers like telepathy and stuff. Not sure what became of him. You'd think that once people reached this level and didn't have powers, they'd quit, but brainwashing. Yeah, they had really severe childhood abuse and trauma to contend with and coped with it by believing they were psychic. We met in like junior high when they still believed this. Eventually, they realized that they weren't entirely wrong, just a little bit misdirected. They're a deeply empathic person who, thanks to their abuse history, is very good at reading facial expressions, body language, etc. They're actually a really wonderful person and ended up becoming a social worker and volunteered at a domestic violence shelter, where all of the qualities that made them a good psychic make them great at helping others who are going through a difficult time. Buckle the F up, everyone, because I was that kid in middle school. I wholeheartedly believed I was a forest elf. I don't even really remember how it started. but I always loved fantasy novels growing up, especially ones about mythical creatures and nymphs and fairies and all that shit. In middle school, I wore a lot of earthy colors, always had flowers in my hair, joined the archery club, which I was not good at, mind you. I wore elf ears to school, and I mostly walked around barefoot, not at school, obviously. I thought I would communicate with forest animals and navigate myself using only the trees and any water source. Needless to say, I was definitely picked on a lot. I'm 26 now and an IT consultant, married to a damn great guy, and have a baby girl on the way. I never picked up archery again, I promise. Wow, I'm surprised I can actually answer this one. In high school, I became friends with a girl I met through theater. This was during the Undertale craze. She got me into the game and eventually confided in me that she was kin with Sans, the skeleton from the game. I decided to go ahead and go with it because I really liked her and I didn't really have many close friends at the time. I asked her what made her believe she was Sans, and she explained that since there's an infinite number of universes with infinite different timelines, there's probably a timeline somewhere in which she really is Sans. I think she also identified a lot with the whole I'm funny and outgoing on the outside, but I'm actually really depressed thing. In all honesty, she had a lot of mental health issues, and it was a form of escapism for her. She kept it to herself and never talked about it at school, but I would listen to her when she needed it, and I would call her Sans after school because it made her happy. I felt bad because she really needed someone to understand her, and it felt like one small thing I could do to make her feel better. She's doing much better now. We kind of fell out of contact, but she's got a good job, and I think she's moved on from the kin thing. It's what got her through high school in one piece, so I don't regret indulging her at all. I know it's easy to make fun of teenagers on Tumblr who say they're an angel or god or character from a video game, but please don't antagonize them. 99 times out of 100, it comes from a lack of attention, self-esteem, or mental health issues, or just a really strong desire to fit in with a community. Someone I used to be friends with identified as a lynx. I was weirded out, but she was my friend, so I dealt with it. Soon she started to say I was sitting on her tail, and she was fully convinced she turned into a cat at night. Last I heard of her, she was drawing furry porn for $100 a piece. Edit. A lot of people are talking about how short lynx tails are. I know. This person was just really delusional. I was sitting a whole desk away from her when she made the accusation. A couple other things she did was claim she was sorry cause she accidentally clawed me with her claws. She had only put her hand on my shoulder. She also complained that the teacher was hurting her ears because she was talking and that affected her cat hearing. Another time, she tried to go a week without glasses to prove her eyes were becoming more like cats. She didn't last an hour. Final thing, she attempted to start a furry Therian club. Her campaign was along the lines of join our cult to unleash your inner animal. Yes, she used the word cult. Knew a guy that swore that he was a reincarnated kitsune spirit. He and I got into an argument one day, and he swore that he would destroy my life because kitsunes never let go of grudges. Mythologically, kitsunes were described as being especially capricious. He ended up telling a bunch of lies about me to everyone he could, gaslit another friend into cutting off contact with me, and occasionally I'll run into someone online that fell for one of the many stories he made up about me. This isn't exactly what you're asking for, but it's similar. From 1st to 6th grade, I had this friend, Allie, that genuinely believed she could see dead people and demons and whatnot. She would do the stereotypical vampire things, pretending to bite people, showing off her canines, talking about blood, etc., but that wasn't like her main thing. She had this one demon that she said followed her everywhere and hid in the bathrooms that we just called it. Allie always described it as being whiter than paper, with 2 slits for a nose and sharp fangs. I wholeheartedly believed her because why wouldn't I? I was a dumb kid that wanted supernatural things to be real, and she was my best friend that had no reason to lie to me. I literally was too scared to use the restroom at school because she said that it always peeked over the stall. As the years went on, though, I eventually realized that she was making it up, but the conviction with which she said that kind of stuff was scary. I know her parents were going through a rough patch at the time, so I think she was just making it up for attention, which she got. I haven't talked to Allie in a while, but another friend of mine ran into her at a fair recently and said she seemed to be doing well. I'm glad things are better for her. I actually went to high school with a lot of people like this who eventually grew out of it. I remember one girl specifically because, based on her Facebook, she has not grown out of it. She claims she had multiple personalities, her main two being herself and the other being a 200-year-old British vampire. We live in the US, and she would put on a British accent and everything. It seems she has found a partner just like her, though, and they're planning a pretty extravagant vampire wedding. Good on them. Well, it's like they say, there's a pot for every kettle, so if you think you're a vampire, you just find somebody who thinks they are one too, and you have vampire babies. It's like Twilight. One of my closest friends that I lived with through most of college thought she had special powers. It was weird, to say the least. She'd been bullied all her life, and I always reckoned she developed this as a coping mechanism. The thing that really stood out to me, though, was that she was so good at getting people to play along with it, and I have no idea how. I saw this scenario play out a few times during the time we lived together, and I was always so confused as to how she kept getting people on board, so to speak. General scenario went like this. She'd meet someone, and if she really liked them, then after a while she'd tell me in a very knowing sort of way that she thought they had the gift, aka they also had powers. She told me once she thought I had them, and I just kind of smiled and nodded and said, "Okie dokie then." So then, she'd get together for lunch or something with this person, and she'd launch into this full-on spiel about how she was all that was standing between the world and destruction, and she could tell that they were also special, and she needed someone to help her fight these battles. Not literal battles, more like astral projection type battles, and help her guard the gates. Hilarious side note, the gates were colored, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. She got mad at me one time when I referred to them as the printer gates, and you'd think that after unloading all the people would run screamingly, but they didn't. They'd show up at our apartment to talk to her, and they'd be talking about these battles and stuff. All I can figure is she was good at spotting people with overactive imaginations who didn't fit in well. She probably would have made a great cult leader, yeah, to be honest. She now works in IT, and we still talk to each other pretty regularly. She wrote a fantasy novel that she's trying to get published, which was actually quite good when she let me read the draft. I'm guessing that became the outlet for her stories when she grew up, so to speak. I kind of want to ask her about what was going on with her, but I kind of don't want to open that can of worms ever again. When she wasn't in full-on what the F mode, she was the most kind and genuinely fun person to be around. I'm sort of afraid the printer gates will rear their ugly head again if I bring it up. Years before we had goths and New Age enlightenment, I used to manage an occult bookstore, and I met wannabe vampires, werewolves, fae, and others. Sometimes it was like being in charge of a Dark Shadows convention. I used to date one of the store's patrons, a 6-foot Amazon from Texas who claimed she was a vampire. She wasn't too crazy, but towards the end of the relationship, she was getting too bitey. When I was in the US Navy, we had this dude who thought he was a wolf in a human body. He would howl at the moon and just be generally strange. I knew someone that had served with him before me at a different command who said he had to be forced by medical to shower. When asked why he wasn't showing, he told them it would wash away his scent and he wouldn't be able to attract a mate. I don't know what happened to him. Had this guy in my shop. No idea how he made it through basic training, but this guy absolutely believed he was a werewolf. We were deployed and working night shift on the flight deck on an LHD, and the desk sergeant told him to go do a job on one of the aircraft. He flat out refused, stating it was a full moon and he would turn into a wolf if he went outside. So, in true flight line fashion, a few of us dragged him outside. He was kicking, snarling, howling, growling, and when we get to the flight deck, he starts wrenching and making weird screeching noises, like he's actually thought he was transforming into a wolf. He started saying, "You don't want to be around me for this. I get very violent when I'm a wolf." Then proceeded to jump and run around on all fours, acting like he was a werewolf, I guess. We are all just laughing our asses off. We know he was weird before deployment, but no one really knew how weird, and we certainly weren't prepared for that. He was also a stinky kid in the shop, so we torque stripped his body wash to see if he was using it. He would strip down and go to the showers in a towel and shower shoes and everything, but he would stand in there and not turn the water on or just wet his hair to make it look like he showered. Well, after 2 weeks of the torque stripe of his body wash not being broken and him stinking to high hell, our sergeant confronts him. He said that the water and body wash were bad for his fur, that werewolves don't like baths. So the sergeant said, "Fine, we'll bathe you like a dog then." So he tells Staff Sergeant what's going on and his plan and gets to go ahead. Because at this point, it's either what happens next or paperwork. 6 of us grabbed him out of his rack, drug him to the showers, poured soap on him, and scrubbed him with deck brushes. The whole time he was like a dog, howling and barking and growling and all kinds of weird shit. When we got home, Gunny sent him to mental health to be evaluated, and turns out he had some sort of identity dysphoria and legit believed he was a werewolf. He wasn't in the Marine Corps much longer after that. A few of us think he faked it to try and get sent home early from deployment on medical, then kept it up when he realized he would be able to get out of the Corps early with a medical disability associated with deployment and collect a check for the rest of his life, which he does. Way back in the 80s, while I was still in elementary school, there was this kid who every day swore he was a ninja. He couldn't show us any of his moves or weapons, as his sensei had forbidden it, but that didn't stop him from making his outlandish claims, like the nunchucks and ninja stars he had hidden in backpack, or how he had fought and killed an entire gang, etc. One day, he claimed he could spin so fast he could turn invisible. Several classmates demanded he prove it during free time, and for whatever reason, he finally relented. He started spinning in circles, but we could still see him, so he kept spinning till he threw up. When I was a kid, I think my classmate believed I thought I was a Power Ranger. I wore morphers constantly. It was my favorite show on TV, and I was kind of obsessed. Now, at the same time, I may have pretended I was a Power Ranger in play, but I knew I wasn't. I kept the morpher with me because I was so freaking alone I needed something. I was getting treated badly at home, school was just as bad, and I was incredibly anxious, and I just broke. I was puking every single morning before school multiple times. Being that anxious all the time sucks, and I just wish that Rangers would come and rescue me. That's why the morphers were always with me. I was 9 out of 10, and looking back, I knew they were the only reason why I'm still here. The thing is, though, I enjoyed the show until I was 13, because the show grew up with me. I kept it all quiet. The morphers stayed with me, but hidden in my backpack after I turned 11. Somehow, thanks to my asshole mom, everyone knew I still watched. Even after I stopped, people still believed I was still obsessed with it, and they weren't wrong. But I kept it all quiet. Also, I don't know why it was such an issue in the first place. Everyone seemed to think I thought I was a Power Ranger, and I don't know why. That crap even followed me to uni, via one guy from my school. He was very quickly shut up when I asked him why he was pulling this crap here. I had never spoken to him before or had anything to do with him. He stayed out of my way after that. People, I never thought I was a Power Ranger. I just enjoyed the show and loved thinking about how it would be to be one. I mostly just thought about how I finally had a group of friends to hang out with and talk to. Actually, fighting some monster very rarely came into it. I was just an incredibly lonely and scared kid who latched onto something as a coping mechanism. Look, some people could look at this as sounding a little sad or alone, but whatever it helps get you through the day. So if you thought you were a Power Ranger, guess what? You were a Power Ranger. At least to me, if that matters. When I was in uni, one of my housemates had his mate come over and hang with us one night. At the time, we were all into tabletop RPGs and stuff, so when I started chatting to him and he mentioned he's a half-angel, half-demon demon hunter, I initially didn't bat an eye at it. I was like, that's cool. I'm a telekinetic spirit medium myself, and we chatted happily about it for maybe 10 minutes before we began to clock on that he wasn't talking about RPGs. I gotta admit, when I did figure it out, I was not diplomatic. Not aggressive or anything, but not diplomatic. I may have laughed at him.